Hello, hello. Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope and pray that you're all doing well, staying warm, and being able to spend time with family and loved ones as we remember the reason for the season this holiday. For today's meditation, the passage can be found in the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, verse 6. And perhaps this is one you may all know as it relates to Christmas. Verse 6 reads, "For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace." This verse reveals and reminds us who Jesus is and what he came to do. It's a verse that speaks to us about the power of the God we serve. However, in order to understand the verse, we need to briefly look at the context in which these words are written. The book of Isaiah is one of the most significant books of prophecy and one of the most important books in the Bible. It is regularly quoted throughout the New Testament and also speaks of the coming Messiah and what he will do. In Isaiah chapter 9, we see a prophecy that talks about a future for Israel that is dark but will be lifted. It's a restoration to a bright future. Isaiah prophesied that this will come about by a child that God will send who will become king. But this isn't any ordinary man. Rather, he will be called Mighty God and Prince of Peace, and his rule will never end. In verses 1 to 7, we see this incredible promise that the darkness will be replaced by indescribable glory that will never end. All this will be brought about by a baby. But I specifically want to exposit and exegete verse 6. And to help better understand this, I've broken down the verse into 3 sections. Section 1. For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us. So the context here is that Isaiah is describing the future when God will provide a way out of the darkness, and that will come through the birth of a child. This passage is prophesying about Jesus and what he will do for God's people. Isaiah uses 2 terms in the verse to first describe the coming Messiah. A child is born, and a son is given. The child points to the humanity of Jesus. He came in the flesh so that we can experience God in a whole new way. The title of Son points to the deity of Jesus. While he came in the flesh, he was still fully God. We tend to think of this verse as a Christmas passage because it predicts the birth of Jesus, and it certainly deserves a spot in our Christmas readings. However, the promise of this verse goes far beyond that. It's a promise that God will restore his people, and Isaiah dives further into that in the coming words. Section 2. And the government will rest on his shoulders. Isaiah further describes this coming Messiah, and the picture he paints is unique and remarkable. The government will rest on his shoulders is further showing that he will be a king. This is a lavish title that paints a picture. Obviously, he doesn't mean that the government will literally be on his shoulders, rather, that he will hold up the government. These kinds of lavish titles were common for kings to be given at this time. But what's more interesting is that his titles are going to get more and more elaborate. What Isaiah is doing is showing that this child will be of God himself. Section 3. And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. This king will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. That's quite the list of names, and each describes what the king will do. So let's break down each title. Wonderful Counselor describes a king that is wise. This would cause most Israelites to think of King Solomon, the wisest person to ever live. But this king is far wiser than even Solomon, and he will lead his people with wise counsel that will not lead them astray. Mighty God. Isaiah here is telling his readers that this king is divine. While other kings might not have some of the attributes in this list, they do not have this one. This king will be divine and will be mighty to save his people. Everlasting Father indicates that this king's reign will never end. But what's more incredible is how he will rule. He is our Father. In other words, he's not going to rule by demanding subservience. Rather, he will rule as a loving and caring Father. Prince of Peace is one of Jesus' main names because it's what he came to do, bring peace. This peace isn't just peace on earth, but also peace between us and God. This king is the ultimate peacemaker. The titles and names that verse 6 gives the Messiah depict him as one who has the power to fulfill his plans and promises and deeply cares for his people. He will subdue his enemies, and all who live under his rule will enjoy peace and prosperity. How Isaiah chapter 9 verse 6 applies to our lives is that it reminds us of who Jesus is and what he came to do. When these words were written, God's people were in a dark season. This verse is a promise that God was coming to rescue them. The same is true for us today. Jesus entered into this world as a child to pursue you. Verse 6 shows us that God is wise, He is mighty, He is our Father, and He is bringing peace to us. When the storms of life come, this is a verse we should cling to. God is with us, and He will provide for us. This is a great verse to remind ourselves of every Christmas, but it's also one that we should commit to memory throughout the rest of the year as well. This verse alone reminds us of the incredible power of the God we serve. Selah.